know we just couldn't get enough of you guys. You know, I think that's just what happened, really. It's like, let's just make an excuse to get on and just to say hi. But I hope you all had really lovely Merry Christmas, and obviously the New Year's is coming, but you know, hopefully you were able to slow down a little bit and take in the beauty around you, as well as taking the time to adore your inner being and yourself. So that's really, really important this year. Okay. That is going to fuel your next year. So I said in my writing, I need to kind of go back and read what I wrote, but basically the moon cycle is working out just so beautifully this year. It doesn't always work this way, but the moon cycle is going to basically end and go into the new moon right as we are saying hello to 2022. So this is such a lovely time to the waning moon, you know, so we're not piling more on, but it's truly the removing that we're doing and clearing and cleaning things out and making the way, right? That's why it's called way making. And Chris can tell you a little bit more, because it was the term that he wanted to use several years ago. And that's what we've been using since, but he will tell you more about that a little later. But I just wanted you to know that the moon is on our side to really take this time. And I wrote down some thoughts that I had about the way making. And, you know, I really do believe that if you wish to, and I'm going to look at some of my notes that I wrote down here, but if you really wish to experience 2022, I'm sorry, have I been saying 2022? Yeah, I took some time off, so my brain is just like going, yeah, this is electromagnetic fields going on here, because we went to a place with no cell receptions and no Wi-Fi, so that was amazing for my body. So I think my body's recalibrating. But if you would like to experience this next year, but into the future differently than how it's been for you, I truly believe this from my own experience, and we'll share some of it with you, my own experience and Chris's own experience with doing this consciously, the way making consciously has done for us. So Annette, say, everyone, will you get to hear some of Chris's, oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just reading that in the middle.
No, Annette was saying, will we get to hear some of Chris's harmonium? Well, that's a little bit of a mystery that we're going to leave for later, I think.
He kind of channels that, so I never even ask him about it anymore. Annette, sorry, I just kind of jumped to another place. But Annette, the thing is, I'm really nervous to ask Chris about the harmonium. He gets really kind of protective of harmonium, because it's his expression that transcends beyond his arms and fingers, and he truly channels music. So I always ask him, and I say, are you going to be doing harmonium? And he's like, don't ask me about that. So I stopped asking about it. So I don't know if all of us really want him to. Maybe he will say yes to it, but I have absolutely no idea.
Let me add something to that. It's a good question, because the way that I learned the harmonium was as a very sacred expression, and so I'm very cautious about how I bring it out, if that makes sense. One thing that I learned very clearly in the process of learning from my teachers is that, for me, I don't play the harmonium except for these kind of sacred expressions. So I don't just tootle around, you know. I don't just randomly make music or play songs like you know, my best rendition of Beatles songs on the harmonium or anything like that. I don't just play it to play it. And so I hope that makes sense. So it's so to Masami's point, and I hope I don't sound quite as sharp as that when I'm responding to her, but yeah, it's something that sometimes I don't know. I mean, those of you that attended our long weekend retreat, I didn't know for sure how that was going to pan out. And in fact, there were a lot of technical mishaps, but I ended up having this melody just come to me. I sat down with it in thinking in our preparation for the retreat, and it just happened. And so it happened. But it's not always like that. So I hope that's enough for now. I'm not ruling out the possibility. I honestly don't know, because sometimes that's one of those things that requires a combination of serendipity and a little bit of inspiration at the right moment. And it's not always the right time. So we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. But Annette says, okay, I won't ask you to play. But it was a beautiful, all capital, beautiful experience that I hope to one day repeat. I'm totally with you,
Well,
Annette.
I would say
And I have to say, when he says, I'm going to go play my harmonium, he's like gone for several hours. And I think he literally is not even in the linear time zone anymore. He is channeling that stuff. It like the universe speaks to him through music and poetry. I'm sure you picked up on that, but he's a true poet and he's a true musician from kind of a different location, than performing arts kind of thing. So anyway, I think we really went into this topic, and I totally mid-sentence went somewhere else. But do you wanted to add something else?
I was just going to say that it's very much in keeping with what we're here to talk about today, which is this way-making process. So we've framed it as a retreat because it's so important for us to acknowledge, one, that we are on our own journey. We are on our own path. And being on that path, there are requirements. If you imagine being a traveler, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that far back in time, but you could go back, imagine the times of people taking caravans across vast spaces, deserts and mountains, and through foreign countries that they've never seen before. There's several things about this process that, one, and I'll be sharing some poems. That's something Masami mentioned, that some of this, we will be using our creative imagination during this retreat, and we'll be using poetry to activate some of that. But it's this idea of a collective experience. You don't want to travel completely alone. It's very important to have other people who understand and can come alongside the process at the same time as you are, even though it's your process and my process is my own. But it's so important that we can do this together. So we will let the creative inspiration take hold. And one thing that I will say is that if the right opportunity comes up for the harmonium to appear, it will. Okay, I'll just say that right now, because there are many ways, and music is one of them. But again, and I feel this very, very personally, that this type of sacred music needs to be used sparingly, because it's not for stimulation, it's not for entertainment. And so it's something that we need to be receptive to, because like Masami said, it takes us to another dimension of our being that we don't usually tap into. And so we need to be ready for that on one hand. And so that's something that we're going to be doing some preparatory things through this retreat, through language, through poetry, through direct personal experience that will possibly, and I don't mean to tease this out, but this is something that, we need to set the stage before we activate the musical sphere, okay? Because it's a really powerful thing, and if we're not ready for it, then what it can do is it can actually go in the opposite direction of what we're trying to do with waymaking. Because the waymaking is about gathering up our energy, gathering up our perspective on where we've come from, so that we can see, is this serving us anymore? Is this something, do I want to keep going in this direction? Is this where the need is? And so I'm just adding this on to, I'll come back with a little bit more to say here about the some of the why we call it waymaking. But if we don't prepare for the forward motion and we just stimulate something that's interesting or exciting or fun or even just beautiful, that can actually set us back. And that might sound strange, but a lot of times where we need to lean into is actually uncomfortable. So, what do you think? Should I say a little bit more about the way making
Yeah,
and
why you call
yeah.
it the way making. And I think let me add to what you just said, and I because I kind of finished at mid-sentence when I started. And yes, Janice, it is still open for sure, the Thursday way making, and it's recorded. So I wanted to get that out of the way so everybody knows that, you know, if you can't show up on that time that we put in, please do go back and watch and do this sincerely, you know. And I think that's one of the things that we really ask of all of you that's going to do this, is not to do this by multitasking while you're cooking or while you're watching Netflix or while you're signing up for something or you're shopping on something, and you're just kind of watching us on the side, whether it's a recorded piece that you're going to be watching, or you know, you'll be showing up on in live. The energetic feels the same because we don't exist in this linear time frame. Okay. And I had a question that came to me today in an email that said, you know, I can only be there for the first half an hour. Is it okay if I watch the recording? And do you recommend that? And my answer is absolutely. The fact is, it's your presence. So being present in the moment, it's about your intention of being there fully when you watch the recording or when you show up live. It's your presence that matters. It's the potency that matters the most, right? So really pay attention to that. If you're watching recording and then say, oh, I didn't do this during that time live, doesn't matter. And as we said to you, in Japan, we do this kind of process. We take it much deeper though. You know, this is not like everybody's doing it in Japan, okay, to this depth, but the level that we take will guide you through, and the level that we are going to take ourselves through, it's you can do it till about the mid of January. Okay, so 15th of January or so. If you can wrap it up by that time of what we're trying to guide you through, that's great. So let's say I just have no time on the 30th. I might not have time till the 5th, or the kids go back to school. Okay, that's okay. So try to get it down by mid-January. And so I wrote down how you show up, that matters. Okay. And then another thing, I think we get stuck in the culture that we live in. This isn't East or West kind of idea. I think since the Zoom world started and everything's online and you can access anything without even leaving your room, leaving your house. And I still have sweatpants on today as we speak. You know, you could live in that world. We tend to kind of like we're grabbing things quantity wise, right? Because there's no like endless amount of things you could sign up for, endless amount of YouTube that you could watch for hours on end. I mean, YouTube will just recycle it for you. So, you know, they know algorithm rhythm of what you want. So the next YouTube that shows up, similar stories, you can watch this forever. So there's plenty of quantity out there, but it's the quality that we ask of you at this end of the year time, is the depth of you, the quality in which you show up, not the quantity of it. Okay, so those are a couple of things I wanted to say. And before you, Chris, you go into why you call it way making, is that I feel like in the spiritual world right now, and in the energy world, energy medicine world as well, but there's so much talk about ascension. There's so much talk about 5D. There's The fact is, everyone, and I don't know what you feel about this, but I personally, it's not something that's coming in the future. It's already here. Okay. We've already somewhat adjusted to it, believe it or not. This is why you have to slow down this year. You have to stop and reflect. What have you noticed? It could be subtle. I think we're all like, so many spiritual worlds are saying, oh, the 5D is coming, the ascension's coming, you have to da. And I feel like, are we waiting for some sort of a big bang here? Are we waiting for the sky to crack open? That's not what's happening. We've already stepped into it. It's like frog getting boiled in the lukewarm water. We're already in it. Okay. So this requires all of you to say, I've got to slow down and look back at the footsteps. Where have I come from? How have I navigated my life? How far have I come? These reflections are so important so that you can begin to pinpoint some of the things that you go, oh, I see what this ascension means this to me. And it's bio individual. Okay. So in functional nutritional therapy, we say to everyone, it's bio individual, right? So certain supplements you may need to take, 2 tablets with food. But maybe for somebody else, it's on an empty stomach every other day, only 1 capsule at a time. It's bio individual, right? So really, this ascension that we are speaking so much about right now isn't something that you are going to someday reach. You are it. Okay, you are that ascended being that have chosen to be here right now. And that requires for all of you to stop. And Chris and I talked about this briefly. And we sometimes will go into different rooms and we'll write down what we want to talk about and share. And I showed him what I wrote down. He goes, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I wrote on my notebook. So we are I think we're channeling the same thing. So we feel very good about this way making this year, particularly this year, is that we believe that I wrote it down all underlined. I put in my notebook here. Way making is neuroplasticity practice. Way making is your way of changing and rewiring your brain patterns on a physiological level, right? Lots of people talk about how do I create neuroplasticity? Your brain can change. We can wire differently. We can introduce different things. Your brain is constantly growing for the rest of your life. We learned that your brain is not even fully formed till you're 26 years old now, right? So, but if you don't take the time to reflect, you're not changing the wires of your brain. And before I hand it over to Chris, I wanted to just quickly read this couple paragraphs of the just this article I was reading. And it's from Harvard Business School Review. And she's an executive business coach. Her name is Jennifer Porter. And her title says, Why You Should Make Time for Self-Reflection. In parentheses, she says, even if you hate doing it. And I agree with that, that even if you hate doing it, okay. If you asked me many, many years ago, do you want to reflect on your life and revisit and see what you've learned and how you've come, how far you've come and what you have changed and so on and so forth. I wrote down, I said, it was painful. It was burdensome for me. I was already exhausted by this time. I don't want to review anything anymore. And I felt like just same old anyway. And I even wrote down, been there, done that. So I think I already know. So I have no interest in knowing more. It seems very unwelcoming to be taking time to reflect on this year, let alone 2 other years that I'm going to be introducing to you during Waymaking. I honestly hated doing it. But since we started doing this, our lives changed. I'm just telling you, it changed remarkably because I think we started to rewire not only our brain, but we started to rewire how we show up in this world. Okay, so then in this article, coming back to this article, the first couple paragraphs, she says, when people find out I'm an executive coach, they often ask who my toughest clients are, So she gets asked this a lot. Inexperienced leaders. So somebody said inexperienced leaders, senior leaders who think they know everything, leaders who bully and belittle others, leaders who shirk responsibility? I never even knew that word, shirk responsibility. Her answer is, the answer is none of the above. The hardest leaders to coach are those who won't reflect. particularly leaders who won't reflect on themselves. So I'll just stop there. If you want to read the rest of it, you can Google this, right? From Harvard Business School Review. But I would agree with her. Working with thousands, literally thousands and thousands of people for over 20 years, the hardest clients to work with are the ones that do not reflect. And they don't reflect on positivity either. So I always have to say, what are some of the things that have changed? What are some of the positive things? I made one of my clients last week write to me as a homework. And I said to her, I am not speaking to you next month. So you write to me with 5 things that have changed positively. And she wrote back to me, and it was, to her, it was a beautiful process, because she's like, I had not realized how much I have become negativity biased person. Okay. So those are a couple of the things I want to say. Okay. So Chris, your turn.
Okay. So one of these things about, I'm going to recap a couple of things Masami said. One on this idea of neuroplasticity and negativity bias. I mean, these are terms that come out of psychology and neuroscience, but we can understand them very quickly, because it's basically the idea that if we don't look at how we act, how we behave, how we think, what we believe, what motivates us, how we go about our days, if we don't ever look at that, then basically what we do is we resort to the default, which is kind of, you could think of it as the path of least resistance. And that path of least resistance is going to look a lot like the people that we spend our time with, the people that shaped us growing up, the people that were part of our educational process. So what we have to really pay attention to, and this is where this powerful process of waymaking comes about, is that taking this intentional time to look at where we've come from gives us the opportunity to change course or stay on course if it's the right way for us to go. But how would you know if you don't check? I'm going to make an analogy, which is to investing. For those of you that have stocks invested in the stock market, you probably have heard something before about this idea of rebalancing your portfolio. And that might seem like a strange analogy here. But if you're not familiar with that term, all it means is that once a year at least, maybe a couple or 4 times a year, people will go back and they'll check out what they're invested in and see if that's still working. Is it getting them closer to their goals? Has it stopped working? Is it actually working in the opposite direction that they want to go in? Are they losing money? So there's some similarity there about checking in. And one of the things that Masami mentioned is this idea that it's an intentional process. You don't accidentally stumble into your own waymaking journey. If you're not paying attention, you will take the default path. And so this is something that there's something of an invitation here. And that is, and we'll talk about this more in the actual retreat, but it's this idea of the right-hand path and the left-hand path. And this goes back to the mythology of humans, that the right-hand path is the one that society follows. That's what all of our rules are about. That's what's acceptable. That's what convention tells us we should do and tells us what we should want. But because we've already brought in this idea of bio-individuality, which means we each have our own way, that we need to do everything from sleeping to eating to cleaning out our system to finding what makes our hearts sing. All of that is bio-individual. That's the left-hand path. Really being willing, even sometimes at the expense of losing some of the benefits of being just like everyone else. When you take that left-hand path and follow your own heart, your own bio-individuality, this is where you get to really discover who you are and what you are. And I'm going to tie that into even what Masami mentioned about this idea of 5D. Now, I come from more of the physics side of this. When I hear the term 5D, fifth dimension, what does that mean? And from a just a straight physics viewpoint, it's essentially the dimension of manifest interconnectivity. It's where everything is already connected on a cosmic level. And they're starting to show this in physical experiments. That's not just theoretical. So it's not, like Masami said, it's not somewhere we're trying to get to. It's not a fairyland or another heaven that we need to somehow earn our way into or work toward. It's already here. It's already available. So the question is, can we tap into it? Can we directly experience that energy in our own lives? So that was a bit of a tangent, but let me go to the why. We call it this, okay? This idea of way making. Some of this I've already alluded to, so it's a little bit of repetition perhaps, but each one of us has a task of finding our own way. That's just a given in our lives. And something that I've mentioned many times before is that we really don't see what our path is looking forward. If you look ahead into the future, you can't say, there's my path. You can see possibilities, but you don't see your actual path because your path is something you've already made. It's something that already happened. So you have to look backwards. You have to see where you've come from. And this is, again, why it's so important for us to stop. Don't just keep, blindly trudging forward with your head down and not looking up. It's so important to revisit our experiences, our behavior patterns, our beliefs, the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that we have told that we've learned from others that aren't even our own, but we've come to believe them and hold them. We've got to reassess those things. And like I said before, we have to ask, are they working for us? Or do they need to be rebalanced so that they can serve us right now? And then one of the big pieces, again, that we're going to be talking about for this year's theme is what are the cords that need to be cut? And this gets back to the idea of, imagine pruning a tree, okay, or pruning a bush, something that you know what its potential is, you know what you want it to look like. But if you let it just grow wild, it's not going to reach that shape all by itself. You have to help it. And so there's something about that in our own lives and our own journeys that we have to prune things. We have to cut away the parts that are not feeding us, that aren't fueling us, that aren't taking us in a forward direction toward where we are aiming. So a lot of this is about tapping into that growth potential that we have already. And we have to slow down and take times like this to see the way. So the way making is pretty literal. We are taking the time to learn about where we've come from so that we can make our way forward in not just a random and chaotic way, but in a meaningful way, in a deliberate, intentional way. And just a couple other points that I'll make. And then I also wanted to just share an example of my own, from personal experience. So again, so much of what we talk about, the mundane stuff, eating, sleeping, supplements, these are all connected to way making. Those are also things that you don't just passively do and then have some magical result. You have to be intentional with them. You have to mean to do them in a certain way and pay attention to the effects so that you can know you're getting to where you want to. Okay? So one of the things about why are we doing this now of all times? Because I would make the case that waymaking is something that's ongoing. It's really something that we can be doing all the time, every day. But there's this extra potency at the end of the year. Part of it is because of the promise of the new as we open up to a new calendar year, even though it's a continuation in many ways. It's also quite literally new. It's new things coming that we don't know about yet. And so there's a lot of energy around the end of year and the beginning of the next. And what Masami has said about taking the time at this end of year point, there's something of, I would say, if we're going to benefit from what we have gained in this year, 2021, we need to do it right around the time that the transition is happening to the next year, because there's something of a decay factor. The further we get away from the past year, the less potency that learning opportunity has. We may find it again, because if we didn't pay attention to it, it'll probably come up again in a different form. But this is really an opportunity to cap off a period of our life and say, okay, these are the things that came through. And it's like a sieve, you know, a strainer. You want to catch the things that you want to keep, and you want to let the rest of it pass on. The stuff that's not useful for you, that you aren't growing from anymore, let it pass on. So it's very important to take this journey, join in with others. And again, live or virtual, like Masami said, your presence is the defining factor for your experience of it. But you can still make the journey with the whole group, whether it's live or following the replay. And it's so important to take these times to rest into the silence and the stillness and the depth of what we are. So for me, this has been a very personal process too. And I can tell you some of these things I've mentioned before, but it's still very much a part of my life. I have learned to think of myself over the last 27 years, approximately. That's pretty specific, actually. The last 27 years. 27 years ago, I had a very severe accident that resulted in a traumatic brain injury, neurological damage, structural damage, broken bones, broken neck, all kinds of things happened. And the result of that quite literally reshaped me. From the moment of that impact, I was a different person. Whether I wanted it or not, I was a different person. And I've been learning who that person is ever since. But what I can tell you is, because of some of the limitations that came from that injury, the series of injuries, there is a whole storyline and belief system, and then a way of behaving that all came together as a result of that. And so what I have been doing in the years since is very slowly unwrapping this bundle of storyline and behavior and knee-jerk reactions. And sometimes I need help. Sometimes I need someone like Masami to be there to reflect it back to me and to say, you know, you're doing this, right? And often I would have to say, no, I'm not. At least I didn't think I was, but I was doing it. And so one of the patterns for me, and goes back to the neuroplasticity. If you don't believe something, you won't even think to look for it. Okay. If you don't believe something is possible, you won't even look for it. And then if you're not looking for it, you won't even be able to see it. Okay. Even if you believe it, but you're not looking, you won't see it. And so all of these things have to come together. The neurological, the psychological, the behavioral, all of them have to come together. And so for me, a pattern that I have that comes from this old story, which is I can't handle too many complex demands on me at one time. If my list starts to get too fast, too big, too fast, too many working parts, that's my old pattern, is I start to feel this overwhelmed feeling. I start to shut down. I get snappy. I lose energy. I start spending energy on stress and anxiety instead of looking at the situation clearly. And what's so interesting for me is this is something I could just keep doing, getting triggered with this pattern, snapping at Masami when she points something out to me, or if I feel like she's adding something to my list and I'm overwhelmed. But what I've started to realize since we started doing this way making for ourselves is that there are other options available. I don't have to just default to that. Again, the default is do nothing. Do nothing and stay in the same pattern. Okay, that's the default that we all have. But since we started doing this, I started to realize there are more and more ways for me to express myself, even while these patterns are getting turned on and triggered. And so what I'm able to do now is, even on a day like today, where it was getting stirred up, I'm able to recognize this is happening. I'm doing this pattern. I don't want this to be the defining way that I behave. So with our theme of cord cutting this year, what I'm doing is I'm working on cutting the cord with that belief that I can't handle too many complex things at once or I get overwhelmed. Because the fact is, that's only partly true. I actually have healed and recovered and done the work so much over the last decade and more that I do have the capacity to move in a different way. But I have to look for it. I have to believe it is possible for me. And then I have to take the active steps to move in that direction when the old pattern stirs up. But that also requires letting the old pattern speak. Okay, if I just try to suppress it, I'm just making it that much stronger. So I also have to acknowledge when it comes up and say, no, I'm doing this, and it's really irritating to everybody. But I'm doing it. I'm stopping doing it now. I'm changing it now. And this doesn't need to be my dominant way anymore, because I can now move in a different way. So these are some of the pieces of why waymaking is so important. For me, I want to have not just a reactive way of moving forward. Moving into 2022, I want to have my full energy toward what is there. What is the invitation that's coming toward me in my life? I don't want to be using my energy replaying these patterns that don't serve me. So that's the cord I'm cutting as we go into this process. And I've talked now for a long time, so I'm going to pause and hand it back to Masami. But I hope that helped to clarify and give some shape to why this is such an important process for all of us, but also for me personally.
Yeah, it was really, really helpful. I learned a lot. I took notes, lots of notes. But I really resonated with the part that you mentioned towards the end about you don't want to, I put the word like use or allocate energy towards just repeating the same pattern. And I think that's really important because we are all given set amount of prana when we come into this world. And I learned this long time ago from a yogi from India that I was studying yoga nidra from. And some of you have heard this story, but I would take his yoga nidra class to learn how to do yoga nidra and teach yoga nidra, but I would fall asleep. You know, he would start talking in his like really quiet Indian accent English, and I'm just like, I'm out. Like 20 seconds into it, I am not there. I'm asleep. So I learned that is a clear sign of your adrenals being totally shot and exhausted. But that came a lot later, you know, when I started to learn about the functional nutritional side. But one day I just went up to him and I said, I'm recording your sessions because I am not learning anything. So I showed him the recorder and I said, I'm recording so that I can go home and listen to it again because I am asleep. And he started to ask me, so what do you do? And, you know, at that time I was getting my master's. So I was in school, but then I was working full time. I had about 5 jobs that I was juggling. Not all of them are full time or anything, but all 5 jobs made it more than a full time. So I was working all the time and I was going to school. I just had no prana left in me at that point, felt like. Anyway, but he said to me, I said, you know, your prana is so precious that is given to you when you first come into this world. And they're basically like stored in your kidneys. And it doesn't surprise you, right, that we have 2 kidneys. And my very first client was an oncology doctor. She worked with people getting dialysis in the kidney department. And so she taught me a lot about kidneys. And then one day I asked her, I said, so how much of the percentage of the kidneys do you have to have in order to still be on this earth? She said, oh, you can lose one completely. You can sustain your life on 20% of your last one. And then I thought, whoa, seriously? And she said, oh yeah, you can go like that for quite some time to come. And I thought, wow. So, I mean, the universe really equipped us with plenty of prana to pull from. But what I was doing was that I was just sucking my prana dry, right? So what my yoga teacher said was that he said, so what do you do? So I explained it to him exactly what I just said to you. I do this, I'm doing that. Da, da, da. And then he said, wow, so, nothing will ever amount to anything because you're putting 15% of your energy here, 20% here, another 15 here. So you, at the end of the year, you look back at your life and you go, wow, there's nothing that is amounting to anything that makes my heart sing. So it required me to stop and say, what makes my heart sing, first of all? And what are some of the things that I need to put aside, give up, and let go so that I can focus my prana, focus my precious energy that I received from my ancestors. So that's what I started to do. But if I didn't reflect on my life, who knows? I was stuck in that rut. I was stuck in I went through divorce a while back in 2000, end of 2001, and we're basically getting the paperwork done in 2002. I felt like I was starting over in my life. I had nothing to my name. So I was just doing everything. I was just like, I got to do this. I'm going to say yes to this. I'm going to do that. Da, da, da. And that became my pattern for so long. And it's like, I have to do this on my own. But when I began to do this way making seriously and started to look back, it's like, I've got to stop the way I am approaching life. I'm not trying to catch up to something. I am not left behind. I cannot be putting all my energy and spread myself so thin that nothing ever amounts to anything. So those are some of the things that really taught me, and much more that I will be sharing with you, but during the way making on Thursday. But it's just made a tremendous difference in my life and how I show up to life, because I turned back and looked at my footsteps and what I have gained, what I have learned, what I can let go, and what I'm grateful for, and what made me survive, and now what would make me thrive. Right. And I believe that in spiritual communities, there's so much emphasis on, like I said, ascensions and 5Ds and so on and so forth. And we're being almost asked to, I put almost expected to, or pressured into evolve and change and shift in a profound way. But I feel but how would you know what to change, how to evolve? Why are you trying to shift if you don't slow down, particularly this time of the year when in the Northern Hemisphere, we have the darker nights that kind of welcomes us to go into our past, welcomes you to look back, not always look ahead. And, maybe if you're new to my work and new to Chris and my work together, it might disappoint you, to be honest with you, that we're not going to sit here and say, 2022, here are the predictions, and take this supplement and then you're going to be so healthy for the rest of your life, you will live forever. We don't have these potions and a perfect X, Y, and Z. If you do this, if I could do that, I would be so marketable, everyone. I would have tremendous amount of people that are following me. But I can't do that. I can't sustain my own calling that way, right? So the work we do is depth. It's sometimes messy because your soul requires messiness. I don't know you knew that, but your soul expression requires human messiness.
Can I comment?
And that's why you want to get into the muddy place. You want to play with the mud. You want to go dive deeply and fly up together. And that's what I'm interested in. It's not, are you in the darkness? Are you in the lightness? Are you only sending light? Are you a light worker? You know what? We're both. We work from both spectrums, right? Stop this mindset. If you don't learn anything, you're not signing up for Waymaking. Learn one thing, please, from this call, is that stop the language of duality. That includes, we have to go to the light. We need to be light. We need to ascend. We need to lighten up the load. Okay. we've got to stop that kind of a language. We really do, because we don't understand what light is if you didn't go deep enough to the darkness, to the roots, to the germinating seeds that are in the dark, cold place today, right now. If you don't do that, you don't know what it is to come out into the sun. So it's not you're a light worker or you're this, I'm sending light. I am, yeah, you know what? I send light. I do. But that's because I commune with darkness too. And that's what I hope that you gain from this. And this is something that I would love for you to explore this time of the year. Okay, Chris. And then if there's some questions, we have to answer questions before we're done. So
Well, this is just hopefully a short comment, but it's related to the human messiness. Like probably many of you here, I'm something of an expert on human messiness and in my own life. And that's something that is a really important thing to acknowledge, because I was going to go very similarly to what Masami just said, around the importance of going to those dark places in us and touching them. Because that's actually, like she said, that's where the seeds of creativity are. They're not out there in the light for everyone to see. They're actually being nurtured in that dark, unknown place. We don't know yet what they're going to become. And that's what can make it so frightening, is the unknown aspect of the dark. But what I wanted to say too is, just as an invitation, if you're somebody hearing us say, well, you have to look back and you think, well, because I've been there. I've been in many dark years consecutively in my life before now. And I know there were times where for me, I thought, well, I haven't really had anything happen. I haven't really had anything good happen. So I don't even know what to reflect on. Maybe I just don't want more of that. If you really look, this is something where, it's funny, we've already touched on neuroplasticity and these things about getting your brain, getting your body and your mind and your heart and everything aligned to move differently. When you are stuck in a place of, just check yourself right now. Okay, this is an open invitation. See right now, if you look back at 2021, can you see glimpses of blessing, glimpses of opportunity, things that open to you that were unexpected? Maybe things you didn't want, you didn't ask for, you didn't invite, but they came. Maybe it wasn't the time that you wanted it, but it came. And so what I want you to notice is feel the tendency to judge those things because you didn't like the way it came, or you didn't want it at the time that it came. That's our negativity bias turning on. That's our survival instinct turning on. And so that's another reason why we have to push that back. And the way-making process is part of that work, is to pause and look and see the things that we overlooked. Because we are wired, everybody. We're wired, hardwired in our nervous system to see negative, dangerous, threatening things first and loudest. Okay? It's actually a fact neurologically that most people need at least 3 positive reinforcing thoughts to offset 1 negative. Okay, so it's so vitally important to be able to see your way in a different way. You have to spend the time looking at it. Otherwise, you'll just do the default, which is negativity, bias, old patterns. All right, I'll stop there. I know we need to open up for some questions.
Yeah, I don't, do you have any questions, anyone, about this? So I
was just saying, let's open it up. I only saw one question, which was early on, and that was, what is waymaking? So hopefully that's been partially answered, other than to say it's a combination of experiential practice, reflection, meditation, and group communal ritual, which brings us all together in the service of the same thing that we're all working through. Okay.
Yeah. And I would love to bring in a little bit more like a joyful energy too. It's something that I've been working with Chris on, and something that we can sway with. So I was coming back from the mountains yesterday, and I had Chris drive the truck, our friend's truck, so I could be alone in the car. So I could listen to my Mr. Alan Watts. So I've been wanting to listen to Alan Watts for a while. So I was listening to him, and he was talking about how he said to one of the nuns, this is the recording that he did in 1960s, by the way. Alan Watts spoke a lot in the 1960s. So I'm listening to it. He's saying to the nun, what's wrong with your religion is, or something like that is what he said to the nun. She goes, well, what is it? And she goes, you don't swing enough or sway enough. And she's like, what do you mean by that? He says, your music and everything is so beautiful, and I love listening to your music, but you guys are so serious. Like, you hold your hands and, you stand straight, like you're performing in front of the school classroom and being judged if you move. It's like, he's like, what if you just like moved with it a little bit, swayed your body and then like danced with it? Maybe that will make the music a little bit more attractive. And so I thought that's great, and he continued on talking about how us children were told to sit down, don't be squirmy, don't move, don't show your expressions, don't be so happy. And if you get joyful, and I remember like this time of the year, and you can YouTube it. I even wrote down a little note saying I'm going to YouTube this, but little kids getting super excited about opening the presents. Or have you seen those YouTubes that the puppies are just so excited that the wrapping papers are all over and they get to jump into it and then play around? That joyfulness is also very, very important part of the way making also. So it's not this kind of a, we just dive into the darkness and we just get too serious. I ask that it's sincere, that you show up sincerely and you show up with the full truth of who you are and full attention, but not to suck that joy and energetic swinging out of you. Okay. So I'm not expecting you to stand like this and sing a song. Okay. That's not what the way making is. So hopefully there'll be some playfulness within yourself that gets awakened by doing this as well. Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to say too, this is funny because I grew up in the school of the very serious and still church choir singing, where your hands are together and you are performing and it's very serious. The funny thing is we started off with a question about the harmonium, and it's when I play the harmonium, I sway. I cannot help it but to sway and move, and it comes over. You move with it and it becomes part of this very natural flow. And I think that we actually, I know for myself, waste a lot of energy fighting that and trying to stay still. It's like the reed in the river, it's like we're trying not to have the wind blow us. And so we're putting all of our energy into resisting it. It's like if that's what, like the reed in the water, it's like move like water. It's that idea of take the shape that is required right now. I saw there's a question above about will we be doing any individual work with this, and
I mean individual as in you will be doing your own processing. There will be some time for writing and reflection. So I would definitely show up with a really nice notebook, or maybe this year's notebook, or maybe the next year's notebook, and pen and pencils, whatever that you feel very comfortable holding. That will be a good way to show up.
Yeah, that was sorry. I was just going to say that was a great question, because that's part of what we do is you'll have some exercises that we'll be sending you off to do during the retreat, then we'll come back together. So
and it's a 2.5 hours. So, it's a kind of a commitment in terms of the time. Okay. I know it's like, why it's only $41, everyone. You're going to get so sick of us by 2.5 hours, but please show up. And then Mary, I think it was Mary Sue had the question about which research article that I read the first paragraphs for, two paragraphs. I put the link on the chat there, but basically it's the Harvard Medical School, not medical school, I'm sorry, business school, business review. I'm sorry, Harvard Business Review. And the title is literally says why you should make time for self-reflection, in parentheses, even if you hate doing it. So that's the article. So, all right. And any thoughts, any questions?
Hold on just one second. There was a comment from Susanna. She said, thank you for lightening it up for me. I can get nervous when it is too serious. I wanted to say back to what Alan Watts, I'm a big fan of Alan Watts too. And one of the things that he says is, don't take this all so seriously, but take it ever so sincerely. And that's something that we're doing here. I have a
could you say that again?
Yeah,
that was so good.
He's saying, don't take any of this so seriously. So spirituality, life, the problems that we encounter, the things that we consider important, whatever it is, he says, don't take any of this too seriously, but take it ever so sincerely. So you're not discounting its significance, its value, its importance, but you're not getting caught up in that stiff shape of serious, being a good boy or a good girl. That's something that we want to work that in. We've introduced that. I don't really know how to fully occupy this role, but I'm officially a celebrant. I'm a universalist celebrant. I've got a stole and everything that shows that I have this training, but it's still not that serious. I would much rather have us feel the connection and the energy and the direct experience of doing this together than worry about if we're doing it right, or are we missing a step, or, oh no, what if my little altar isn't as good, or I don't come up with something that I meant to. There's always another chance to revisit this. The invitation is always open. It's like that poem from Rumi where he basically is saying, I was so anxiously knocking on this door, and then all of a sudden I realized that he said I was knocking and knocking, and finally it opened, and I realized I was knocking from the inside. And so this is what we often do, is we are not paying attention to the fact that we're trying to get somewhere, but it's already in us. And that's the invitation, is to welcome what is already here, what is already in us, what we already have access to, but usually don't see, just because we're not looking or we're not believing that it's there for us. Okay, I know there are a couple other questions.
So Marilyn said, I know there are certain things I'm ready to release, and there's another behavior that I want to release, and it is fear-based. What advice would you have about this? So I wrote like the whole note over the weekend on that exact topic. Okay, so we will go through them, and I'm not going to answer that too deeply. What is it, Chris?
It said, number one, come to Waymaking.
He's a businessman today, everyone. You know us. We don't sell hard. This is not even the selling. We're just talking here. But anyway, come, really, seriously. And let's see. So what I wrote, that it might be helpful for all of us. And then I was going to talk about this more during the Waymaking, but I'll give you a little sample of it. Is that I look at fear as my old friend, which kept me reaching, moving forward, and making me survive and not giving up. And at times really showing me the glimpse into what it means or feels to thrive. That's what fear is to me. So it's an old friend that showed me some glimpses, some ways, kept me alive, kept me going. But we all have those friends, right? That it's time to let that friend go, but lovingly. That's kind of how I approach fear. Okay. So hopefully that helps. Just think of it as an old friend, nothing to judge. Say, yeah, that was at time and place. That was the right friend. Okay. And please don't put it on a chat that friends have seasons. There's a season for friends. It's like, that's too Hallmark for me right this moment. Let's not go down that road. Okay. For those of you that have read those Friends for whatever, that's a little too Hallmarky. Anyway, so that's what I think. Okay. I hope that was helpful for you.
I'll add that.
And any other questions that we need to, hold on. Mary Sue said, I have a friend who has not been exposed to us yet. Wow. I'm going to cough up so she can be exposed. Would she benefit from this? I think the thing is your friend willing to reflect? Because is this for everyone? Probably not. Is anything for everyone? Air is definitely. Water, yes. Sleep, yeah. Okay. But it's Masami and Chris combination for everyone? Nah. And if you're not willing to really dive deeply into reflecting, it's not really something that I would recommend it to somebody, right? So I think it's not really about, are they going to be okay surviving us? But it's more like, is the person willing to go deeper? And if your friend, I'm assuming, Mary Sue, you're a diver too, like we are. Then I'm assuming your friend is willing to go to the depth with you. Then within herself too, or himself. Then I say, welcome. All are welcome. So I hope that answered it. Okay. Are we good? Any other questions? There are lots of thank yous coming in. And yes, we will be doing an altar as well.
Arlene, there are some simple instructions that are already in the curriculum area of the website for Unteachable for this program. So once you're able to access that, you'll find some simple directions, and we'll also be giving some additional directions during the day of. So, and I want to just say too that fear is something, I see fear as an invitation also. I mean, it is a friend ultimately, because it's something that is telling your whole system, get ready for something new. And that new is scary because it's unknown, but it's not necessarily dangerous, but we still have to be careful. We have to watch out how we proceed. So it's a good thing. And I would say, allow that fear to take a seat in the room. Don't shut it out. Bring it along and see what it has to say as you go through the process.
Yeah. And Arlene, okay, so you haven't been able to access. So I will email you again, and then we'll figure it out. Okay. And then if it means that we contact the Teachable to see what's going on with your account, we will figure this out. Okay. Breathe. I can feel that you've been frustrated and even almost like, I just want to give up. So we'll figure this out. Okay. All right. So I think it's good. I hope that made sense. Waymaking. Okay. And it's recorded, so you can do it at any time, but up to about January 15th is what I would recommend. Okay. Take your time doing it. There's some questions that we've already posted there on the Teachable site. So please start to put that in. If you want to share your thoughts, please start doing them. Yes, we'll be doing an altar, and the altar is going to be a little different than last year. Every year is going to be a little bit different. And this year I'll be picking 2 other years that we're going to be visiting. And in those 2 pivotal years, plus this year, we will be creating an altar that will reflect that. Okay. So that's the approach that we're going to be taking this year. It's very creative for us. This is very channeled and creative for us. So it's not a kind of a set thing that we just follow every year. So hopefully you can show up with kind of jump into the river with us and be creative with us, swim with us. Okay. We're going to go ice, what is it? Swim. What are those polar bear swim clubs that they do? Okay. That's what we're going to be doing. Okay. Okay. Anything else, Chris? We will let them go. Otherwise, they have to get dinners and breakfast and they need to go to bed. Like Susanna needs to go to bed. Yeah.
We're all done with questions. So thank you all for being here and thank you for your comments. And we look forward to seeing all of you that are ready to do this with us on Thursday.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you Thursday. Much love. Bye.